the general public may be given the opportunity to comment on the proposed fiscal year 2015 program of projects. A final decision will be made at the May 27, 2015 board meeting. Individuals wishing to make a presentation today are required to complete a hearing speaker card. This card can be given to staff either at the start of the hearing or during the hearing. Speakers will be recognized in the order in which the comment cards are received. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes per individual speaker, unless additional time is granted. The group can designate a spokesperson by completing the appropriate form and presenting it to staff. The spokesperson can then speak on behalf of the group, addressing staff for 3 minutes for each member of the group present in the audience who waives his or her right to speak, up to a maximum of 10 minutes. Presentation is limited to only the subject for which the public hearing is being held. The public hearing will not be closed until all individuals so desiring have had an opportunity to make a presentation. Please raise your hand if you require a public hearing speaker card, and one will be given to you by staff.
Okay, thank you for that.
One will be left. Just want to make sure. A paid advertisement concerning this public hearing appeared in the Tampa Bay Times on Monday, May 4th, 2015. Notices were posted at TSTA Administrative Headquarters, Park Street Terminal, Central Plaza Terminal, Williams Park, on all TSTA buses, and on TSTA's website on Monday, May 4th, 2015. Information flyers were distributed via insertion in all scheduled by mail requests on TSTA buses and at the customer service centers beginning on Monday, May 4th, 2015. A press release announcing the public hearing was emailed or faxed to major media contacts and area social service agencies on May 18th. To date, we have received no comments on the proposal. Okay, Chairman, I'll turn it back to you for public comment.
Thank you. We have one card that I have received, and Mr. T. Is it Strauss from St. Petersburg. Welcome. We're hearing your comments. Would you maybe come up a little closer to us? Thank you, sir.
I couldn't make it for the other part of me, you know. And I wanted to first of all bring about the comments about Route 18 to the bus stop, and I had got it off here at the bus here from the back door, stepped down, and there's a ramp for a wheelchair at the front of the at Civil and Johnson. My hill went down onto the ramp. I injured myself. And I've got pictures if someone wants to take this, and you can see what everything is about this. To the pictures, there says this has been a rail there, it's gone. The rail should be put on that yellow line. Make sure that no one's going to fall off the sidewalk, or maybe crashing this on when they're riding around someone on a bicycle, whatever, for safety. But the thing is, this is like, I was hoping to talk about getting Route 74 to go across Gandy to Safety Policy Authority instead of Route 44, because it's too hard to go there, because you got this big hard and giant. And it's like sometimes it's like being King Kong's grip. It's a very long walk from walking down Gandy to get across Gandy to get to the next available bus 444 every 2 hours. And I'm on Route 30 bus route, and why should I have to take 2 buses? I get tired of going on and off buses with my pain, so that's a shock or whatever. I'm on direct route to the Tyrone Mall. Why should I have to take 2 buses there? And then I was noticing your talk, the thing about getting for shelters. But why? You really don't need more shelters and not more transit centers. You need to get more money getting the buses back to what it used to be. Stop and take. I found some buses were easy to get around, and others it's harder to grab that. Forget disability. You got on scanning the punches or anything as well, and you're trying to get on all buses. It just makes it harder to get on all buses. That's what I really wanted to say. That's all.
Thank you very much, sir. Could I suggest that you get with Chris Cochran so we can get the specifics about your question on the route, even though that wasn't on capital, but we'd like to capture that. That was the only public comment card that I had for our capital improvement program public hearing. Is there anyone else that has not submitted a card? None, hearing none. The capital improvement public hearing program is now adjourned. Thank you. We'll turn it over to the planning committee.
Yes. Thank you.
Who is?
So the planning committee vice chair, but
I thought I was the vice chair.
yeah, Dorn. Oh, she is?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
You only have one committee without a vice.
I didn't not pull that. Okay, thank you.
Without further ado, let's call the Planning Committee to order. And do we have any public comment on the Planning Committee's agenda today? One? Okay, seeing none, then let's move on to our action items and a review of the April 15th, 2015 minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Okay, minutes accepted. Thank you. We'll move on to our presentation on the CIP program with Debbie Louse.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
The resolution that you have before you really contains two items. One of which is we just held a public hearing on the federal fiscal year 15 program of projects. FTA requires us to bring this to the board, but all of these projects are included in our multi-year plan that we have before you as well. It's our capital improvement program, and it's for the years 2016 through 2020. Our goal is to be able to have a sustainable capital program. And this is, we're focused on the mission of PSTA as we do. And what our main focus is are buses. Buses, buses, buses. I went through and prioritized all the projects, focused on the bus replacement plan, and for the first time we will be using reserves towards those buses. Despite the fact that we have gone through our priorities, eliminated lower priority projects or projects that are no longer needed, and have also gone through all of the grants, all the savings from the projects we've previously completed, and put all those monies towards our bus replacement plan, needing to use reserves. Some of the things that we have done is we've looked to what can we eliminate or reduce. By investing some dollars today in the current system, really utilizing it to the best of its capability, we are able to push out any replacement of our software. It's thus saving $3.8 million. In addition, there is a Fair Media project where we'll be going to the smart card technology. In doing so, we'll be able to not have to replace our fare boxes, but just retrofit them. And by doing so, we're saving $3 million.
Yes.
Deb, you might want to pull that mic in
Oh.
front of you.
Certainly.
So,
Is that better?
That's much better.
Okay.
So, talk a little bit more about the software, because that's been something that has been planned for a while. Isn't
It is. We currently have FleetNet.
Okay.
And when I came on board, I started listening to everybody's comments and concerns on the current software program. And most software programs are designed around best practices. And I think there's been enough change over time in personnel here. The education process wasn't necessarily in place and how to best utilize the system we currently have. So I had a significant number of questions, brought in FleetNet. We've been putting money towards some training, upgrade of modules, adding a few modules at a minimal cost, and we're finding the system is actually meeting our needs. So I don't feel a need to go out for a new system.
That's huge. So it wasn't user error, but we just weren't
I don't think
using all
we're...
the functionality that was already there.
Exactly. I think you'll find that in every system, but we really are using it now and finding ways to push things out to users to make decisions quicker, and we've done a business process review as we've gone through it.
So we've got more training money available.
And we do have money set aside for that, and we're continuing to use the system to its best of ability.
Are we on the current version of FleetNet?
We are. That was part of the problem as well. We weren't always up to date on all the modules.
Okay. Thank
So
you.
we're doing very well.
Great.
The other thing was we've got a lot of bus shelters in the pipeline right now to be input. So we just heard from one of our members of the public and also at track last night. You know, bus shelters are an important amenity. We're moving forward with that implementation now. And because of that, we were able to reduce in next year's budget bus shelters by $70,000. In addition, as we went through a variety of the projects, we were able to reduce or eliminate about $286,000 at this point in time. We're able to move $7.5 million towards buses.
One more question, Madam Chair.
Yes.
So the bus shelters, how many of those are we eliminating new planned shelters?
This would equate to approximately 9 shelters, but we just took to the board, was it last month or month before, a significant number of shelters to be implemented. And it's going to take us time to actually get all those shelters in place, and I believe it was over a $1 million contract that came to the board.
Really what what has happened is we have more than $1 million, I believe, in older, already existing grants, capital money that's been approved by the board for bus shelters. And so this $70K is just letting us catch up with the money we already have and not programming in the new CIP, which is up for the vote here. We're just taking $70,000 out of future year bus shelter money because we're going to spend the money we already have programmed.
How many new shelters are we planning? Say for next year.
The planning department has a plan of where we're going to put our new shelters. We have not purchased new shelters in 2 or 3 years. It's been a very long time. We've been just using what we have. And so as we start to put our new shelters out, they will be replacements for the most part in strategic areas and the places where we put bus landing pads in preparation for shelters.
Well,
We're going to have a whole plan and come back to the planning committee
Right.
on our whole shelter program.
Yes.
when is that?
When do you want to see it? Do you want to see it next month?
Well, I tell you what I do see, and it's been a real concern, is folks sitting on grocery carts at our shelters. It's just been to me always something we need to prioritize for our riders. I mean, either a shelter or a place to sit down to wait for a bus. And so whenever I see us cutting bus shelters, it just...
I don't see this as a cut, and believe me, I've fought for the bus shelters. I continue to fight for the bus shelters and the bus shelter program. This is, as Brad said, this is future money. We have a lot of money to spend on shelters, and because we took a long time in getting the right shelter for us in the area, we've had some money built up on the shelter line item.
Well, I look forward to that conversation, because that's been not a pet peeve, but just a real concern.
We will bring it to you next
Okay.
month, our shelter plan.
Good. Thank you.
Okay, while we're focusing on buses, does not mean that we're not still looking at other areas that are in support of our mission. As I mentioned previously, we have a regional fair media project that we're working on with HART and the other entities. We have our short-range and long-range planning. We want to continue to invest in employees through training, and we have a significant number of technology upgrades. We have a phone system that's about 10 years old. We have software, server, and equipment upgrades that will also be included in the 5-year plan. One thing that I had mentioned was that we have approximately, we're estimating about $15 million by the end of the year that we can use towards buses or other projects. What we're going to do is set aside $4 million of this. There's to be set aside matching funds. What this will allow us to do is I oftentimes say money sometimes falls from the sky. And when you're getting federal funding or oftentimes state funding, if it requires a match, one of the very first questions they will ask you is, if we give you this money, do you have the ability to match it? Can you prove that you have the ability to match it? So by setting aside the funds now, we will be able to do that and be able to leverage a significant amount of money. I think, though, that the decision can be looked at annually as to how much we want to set aside. Some of the projects, like the BRT project that we're looking at, may not be happening today. But at least we will be poised to move very quickly when people ask us for money. And the good news about money for buses, that is a project that is what I call shovel-ready. So we will be poised to move forward.
So to that point, Madam Chair, Brad, I think in this moment to share with everybody that $1 million appropriation set aside in the Senate for our BRT Central Line is in the call. It should be, we should be, yeah. So the House is going to be, because that's where the rubber meets the road in terms of, you know.
Make me laugh when you say that.
Well, I'm just saying that legislative breakfast tomorrow should be real interesting.
But the strategy which we are pursuing forward, getting the bus rapid transit up and running, and those federal grants will require. So the general goal in the CIP that you're presenting here today, which is a big change from the ones you've seen in the past, is to focus on buses, but we are going to set aside some of the reserve funds for the necessary match for our projects. What Debbie's about to show you now, though, is that a lot of the buses and on the BRT project are not happening. So if things change, you know, this might change. This will be revisited in the future, but for now, we're going to set aside some of the reserves for match, but the majority of it for buses.
Commissioner Dayton.
$15 million that we have reserve recommended for buses, does that include the 7.5 that we just talked about?
It's over and above.
So that's, okay. And was that $15 million, was that going to go into the bus replacement that we had set up for 16, 17, 18, or?
We'll be getting to that, but right now we've been able to, actually let me just sneak ahead a couple slides and I'll come back. Staff has been able to, through cobbling together savings from other projects and taking a look at what we could do with reduced or eliminated or pushed out, we have been successful in programming 65 buses over the course of this 5-year program. We will not need to use the reserves to procure those buses out until about 2019. And in 2019-2020, we will be able to meet our goal of, through smoothing out the bus purchase plan, we need to, you know, if you remember, we had a huge hump back there. So now what staff has done is come up with a way of looking and saying, if we could only get 15 buses a year, that would significantly help us. So in 2019-2020, we will be able to fully fund the bus procurements in those years using, for the first time, in 2021, it meets it some of the way, but we have to look forward to how we're going to handle 2021, because the reserves won't carry us that far for our bus plan.
I did have a question on that. I can't remember where it was, but we have the Bill Young.
Yes, and it's
award.
around 20.
Does that fit in there somewhere? Or does
it does. We'll go back. I like this. We're going backwards on this one. We have, as you can see from the top graph, we've got the humps and things that where we'd have to replace, and the smoothing, the yellow line is where we need to kind of smooth out to. As I mentioned, we would like to get to our goal is a 15 bus replacement each year so that our future generations don't worry about these big humps that are coming at them and how to handle it. One of the things that if we don't have the money or as part of the program is we're looking at midlife overhauls. Because our buses are aging, it's going to cost us money. And if we don't have the bus replacement overhaul, we are going to have to increase what we put towards maintenance to be able to keep the fleet in a state of good repair. One of the things that I've heard from this board is a concern of we get capital money, what I call capital money, from the federal government, part of our program or project called the 5307 funds. Those funds in the past have been used for both capital and operating through preventative maintenance. And I know Commissioner Welch has had concerns about, well, we don't want to take all of our money away from capital to put into operations. And since Brad has been here, it's been going down the amount of money that we put towards preventative maintenance. In the plan for this year, we're not increasing that dollar amount whatsoever, and it represents approximately 31% of all of our discretionary, or formula funds, rather. So what we've got here on the bottom is perhaps the board might want to consider putting a cap on how much money we can use towards operations so that we preserve our infrastructure. And I've got on here 40%. Certainly that percentage will be up to the board as to what they might want to consider.
Just a little
Debbie, I'm sorry.
defensive note. Let me just, what she said was, we have increased the amount of money we've been spending on maintenance. What we've tried each year, as you can see that red line kind of going down, sloping downward, is the amount of our federal grants dedicated to maintenance. But overall, maintenance still is going up. Sorry.
Could you just clarify that last statement? You said 31% of our federal formula funds are going from where to where?
31% of our federal funds right now is going towards preventative, which is part of our operating budget. It's our maintenance line items, which I believe is actually down from last year on a total basis.
Thank you.
Certainly. See if I've caught everything here. Part of our strategies in taking a look at the bus replacement program is looking at smaller buses based on route analysis. We've talked about looking at just doing diesel buses versus hybrid. Although we'd like to consider the use of CNG and electric buses as well, and look at the funding opportunities for that. The other thing that may affect our fleet size is if we contract out the services, we may be able to reduce the number of buses that we will need to replace. So these are three strategies that we are looking at going.
Question on that?
Mm-hmm.
Madam Chair. And I know I've seen hybrid today. It's either the Starbucks or I was in a meeting with Commissioner Long until 11 o'clock last night. So I'm
But
just,
you weren't at the breakfast
I
this
was not
morning.
at the breakfast. So on the lower cost for diesel versus hybrid, we know that's lower initial cost, but I'm still not comfortable that long-term, is diesel really the cheaper of the asset than a hybrid?
And this is my experience from my previous life, so I'm going to draw on that at the moment. It's almost cost neutral to be able, diesel versus hybrid. You're going to save money on the hybrid with all the fuel. I think they have more miles between failure. So you're getting all those benefits of a hybrid bus. The diesel buses run very clean today. This is down the road on the hybrid buses, you have major components that will need to be replaced, some of which cannot be replaced.
As you know, those who have been on the board know that just about a year ago, we tried to do some detailed analysis of our fleet here in Pinellas County and the life cycle cost of a hybrid versus a diesel bus, and we came to the conclusion that it was a wash, that over the life of the bus, of a hybrid bus, it would save money on maintenance and fuel such that the total cost, upfront cost, and long-term use was even. What I'm recommending here is, for now, these upcoming replacements for the next 5 years, at least, we program diesel buses. Now, remember that we're buying diesel buses to replace old diesel buses. We're not getting rid of any of the hybrids, which now amass to a quarter of our whole fleet. In the next 5 years, anyways, they're going to be with us for a very long time, and so certainly a new diesel bus is cleaner and better than an old diesel bus, which is what we're replacing. Second, this idea that we as PSTA organization want to show folks like the MPO that we are not, that we're using the capital dollars that we have available to us first before we go and ask them for SCP dollars or something, or some other source, and we set on the amount of, we set that cap on the amount of money we can use for maintenance, et cetera, and we try to buy as many buses as possible out of the federal grants. I think the upfront cost of a diesel bus being so much cheaper than a hybrid, and trying to get to that is sort of a key strategy right now. It's not necessarily the long-term strategy. It doesn't, I think, negate that analysis we did that says it's over time a wash. But since we're trying to buy as many buses as possible right now, before the STP dollars maybe, or the MPO and FSI help us out, hopefully.
Okay, so it's a wash long-term over the life of the asset, but since we need more buses in the coming 5 years, this gets us over the hump, basically.
Yeah.
From an environmental aspect, though, you said new diesels are cleaner than old diesels, and I get that, but how do new diesels compare to hybrids in terms of environmental impact?
Hybrids are better. It's close. Closer, I would say, than maybe even. That might just be a year's time, but hybrids are less polluting in total than even the new diesels.
So you got 59 diesels in the CIP.
Yeah.
What was that again, sir?
59 on the spreadsheet, 59 diesels.
That's the next chart.
Yeah, we also have some other connector buses.
How many of our current fleet now, how many are hybrid buses?
What's the number? Bob, did you?
48 with 8 more on order. Out of 203.
So we'll have 56. Joe Compton is in the back of the room. Tomorrow, we are having a demonstration of an all-electric bus here with the Sierra Club that you're all invited to come. So, again, those are upfront capital. Those are more expensive, but those are
Clean air aspect, but we're not.
true. That's true.
We are watching for the low-no grants to come out, low emission or no emission vehicle grants to come out. So we'd be looking at some options to take advantage of those federal dollars to get different kinds of buses as well.
All right. As Brad was just saying, we are looking for new funding partners going forward. We are in the capital plan. We have the sustainable bus plan through 2020. 2021 becomes the key year. And let me just explain a little bit about this federal STP, which stands for Surface Transportation Program funds. Those priorities are set by the MPO. And there is a 5-year, just like we do, a 5-year plan that they place that goes through 2020. They will be the MPO priorities for 2021 this summer. what I think is important, and I think we've probably mentioned it before, is to get on the list. So if we can get on the list, and if any of the projects during the current period come under budget, we may be eligible for it. We certainly want to be sensitive to the fact that there are already projects programmed, and we don't want to disturb those projects, but it's important to look forward today for 2021. What happens if we don't get the STP funds? As I mentioned, we're okay for now. 2021 becomes a critical year. I think if we get word that we are getting the money, and it may just be delayed, or it may be just slightly less than what we anticipate, we can pieces of buses and work our way through it, put more money towards maintenance. What happens if we never get the STP funds? If we never get on the list, we never get the money? I think then the fleet size and the service would need to be adjusted by approximately 10% to be able to meet needs under the current fleet. So we put a lot out there today. Let's just go through on a summary basis. Our CIP plan is focused on our bus replacement needs. We're going to be using for the first time our reserves, our local funds, towards procuring the buses to be able to meet that. And the other thing is we'll be bringing a request for a federal lobbyist. We're in the process of the procurement right now. And a federal lobbyist is going to help us look for funding to keep our buses up to what I would call a state of good. And then if no extra funding materializes, then we will have to look at investments and reductions. Are there any further questions on our 5-year program? Yes, sir.
Great presentation.
Thank you.
And the staff's done great work. Right. So what's the reserve level, say on your slide 8, where you show it was a previous grants and reserve. So what's the reserve level forecast for the end of FY20?
It would be, if I recall right, just maybe about $2 million. I didn't bring.
She sent it to me this morning.
Okay. And so that's not the operating reserve.
No, this is money we're setting aside for the buses.
So the operating reserve is what, 2 months?
It's worth 2 months,
So
yes.
we'll have that out there.
We will.
So this reserve, what are we calling this reserve?
Capital reserve.
Okay, so do we have any other reserves other than that?
We have currently a self-insurance fund reserve, which is at about $5 million, $4 million. We've got money set aside for that reserve.
Okay.
We have then self-insurance,
The operating
there's
is 2
an
months,
operating, and
insurance,
that's it.
the capital.
Okay, and this exhausts the capital.
And this would exhaust the capital.
And how much are we asking from the MPO out of for the 19 buses in 2021? Do we have an amount?
Oh, we'll be short $6.5 million estimate in 2021.
The original, as you know, the original ask of the MPO back in January was 8. So we tried to lower that number by moving these grants around. I don't know if we have I don't believe we felt on an average over like 20 years like that 8 was, but 6.5 is the number in 2021.
In 2021.
Okay, thank you.
Now, from a strategic point of view, if we are able to get on the list sooner rather than later, if there is a shift in projects by the DOT and money becomes available, we could be allocated smaller amounts of money earlier, meaning if we are on the list and we're planned for 2021 based on, as a new project, if projects get shifted, let's say, and they have $500,000 just sort of hanging out there, they can allocate it to us. That helps us all the way down the line. So the sooner we can get little bits of money, the more we can actually push those bigger asks out.
Does the DOT look one way or the other at the use of STP funds for buses?
Well, they use it as a match for other projects, so it becomes what the locals have to give to their larger projects. When you say that, if the MPO says buses are money to go to, then the DOT will look at all of the projects that they have in front of them, look at some of their highest priority projects, make sure those get done, and then also give a bit to the buses. So in the case of the Hillsborough MPO, that's what they do, and Hart gets somewhere between 0 and $5 million a year, depending on what projects are in each year, and that's over the next 5 years.
Maybe another way to answer that question is, in theory or on paper, it is the Pinellas MPO, or is the MPO priority setting that allocates the STP dollars, but in reality, there is a next level of allocation that's done within the walls of the Department of Transportation. And
That's kind of where I was going with that, the concurrency between FDOT and the MPO priority list, and maybe course-correcting some MPO prejudices against the use of these funds for buses.
oh,
Well, there is no set amount that the DOT of STP funds that the DOT has to put towards any one project. So when they do a roadway project, they may draw on 10 different funding line items, and the STP could be anywhere from 2% to 20%. It's their choice. It's just a little bit, it's just how they put all of those sources together to get their projects done.
It strikes me that the sooner we get on the STP list for consideration, the better off we'll be. And it seems like we put that off until October or November or something this year. Is there any way we can get on that list faster, so when the new man comes in on?
We're as a MPO, now Julie Bajowski is the PSTA representative on MPO, but we did send a letter to MPO, and we made a strategic decision to hold off until the new executive director, Whit Blanton, gets settled in.
He's going to be in June.
July.
Right. July, is it?
End of June, I heard.
Yeah.
Is there a way we can get on this right away instead of waiting for November or something like that?
I think there's an education process with the MPO.
They've scheduled a September 21st, I think it is, MPO workshop, kind of like we're having.
Yeah.
So I would say at this point, getting into a priority setting process with the MPO prior to that date is probably unlikely. But hopefully maybe at that workshop, at least the item can be discussed or moved, and certainly from June 22nd on, it's my goal to be pushing on this.
The good news is that there's a number of current and former PSTA board members on the MPO, but there's also a perception that our ask is somehow taking money away from like Highway 19 projects. We need to work with the MPO a little bit better to kind of look at the big picture of what projects are on the list now, what's getting funded, what money's going where, and that makes the PSTA request, I think, more reasonable when we can step back and look at those numbers, but I think it caught a few people off guard.
And they're kind of stuck in the way they've always done things, too. This is a new way of thinking about their role in the big picture. They're not used to it, right?
I'm new on the board. Yeah, and it's, as I understand, other MPOs use these funds. It's a new way of, yeah.
It's been brought up particularly by Commissioner Seal, is if the others get their road funds and this thing intrinsic in the allocation of the PSTA funds, counties that somehow the other counties are not getting with, I guess, DOT contacts to understand how does it work in the other counties versus here? So.
Right, because, as she said, the amount of SDP dollars that comes to, say, Hillsborough County is really about the same as that comes to Pinellas County in total from the feds. And somehow they're able to allocate money to buses, and they get a whole bunch of they get many road projects funded. Same thing in Orlando. They get road projects funded. Now, that's our perspective looking at that and how that works. Does the DOT supplant the STP dollars that are going to the buses with other funds that they have available? Rhetorical question.
And I would guess what goes into this as well, just historically, is that when we had earmarks under Congressman Young, there wasn't the need maybe for this county to have to go into those STP funds that other counties did. And now we're working in a new world of rules, new reality.
But the faster we can get on that list, the better off we'll be.
Absolutely. Okay, so.
Well, yeah, this is an action item. Board, based on any public feedback, we didn't really get any public feedback at the hearing, and then the presentation, the CIP, as shown in an incredibly small font on page 17.
I was going to say, how could you not go over that beautiful spreadsheet?
The bigger font is on page 20 and 21, which is the specific elements that will go into the federal grant.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
So we're adopting the 5-year capital plan, and then the resolutions for the immediate capital funding grants. In the 5-year plan on page 17, I guess, we've got the Central Avenue BRT with some future project funds in 17 and 18. That's TBD, right? The funding for those are TBD.
That's correct.
Page 17.
And what was it?
The very bottom line, Central Avenue BRT.
I had a question on 17 also. In the consultant services, which is number 2 down, we have $200,000 set aside. Is that what we had originally set aside a long time ago for considering Greenlight Pinellas scheduling sometime in the future? What is
That was for a New Starts application. So we set it aside. That would be used for the Central Avenue BRT Small Starts application. So we allocated any capital project that would come under premium services.
And then I've got another question on page 15. It looks about a third down, we're talking about replacement buses. Coming to $15 million. And I don't know, how does that work with the other replacement buses above that? How does that?
That
What
is
is
for
that?
this current fiscal year that we will be getting those buses in, and as part of our plan for this fiscal year. And what we've also done this year is you'll see little tiny numbers underneath a lot of this. So you know that how many buses, like in the replacement buses for $15.2 million represents 21 buses. So that you'd have an order of magnitude of what it would possibly, how many it would.
So what's that per bus?
Hybrids,
That would be probably closer to
700K,
Yeah.
750.
Well, what are the replacement buses above that? There is one FTA for 25 million, and it's 47, and the replacement buses is another 6 point.
That's the roll-up.
That's the roll-up, so you've got a total project
Total
budget
over the
here
5 years.
for the 5 years, and where's the funding sources for it coming from?
Oh, okay.
But yeah, those are the diesel buses that we just talked about as a future.
Okay, they go way up here. Okay. Okay, thank you.
I got a question, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Back on 17, the top row, all buses, our for 222, FY16. What is that? Isn't the alternative analysis done?
This is the finishing of the Howard Franklin Bridge PD&E. So the discussion that we had years ago with the Department of Transportation is that they had enough money to do the alternative analysis from St. Pete to Carillon. And we need you to look at Clearwater to Carillon as well as advance your over the bridge. And so we moved some money around between us so that we could do all of those at once, and this is just us fulfilling our commitment.
Okay, thank you.
Are there federal funds to cover that type of planning?
These are,
These are?
It's paid as federal funds.
I have a question on page 18. Right next to the bottom, there's a $1 million budget entry for RTBI software replacement. What is that?
Real-time bus information, that's the same system. GPS and all that.
And that's for updates for 2018 and Any other questions? Do we hear a motion to accept the...
Move to approve.
Who would recommend? You're recommending to the board.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a recommendation to approve the capital improvement budget to the full...
One of the items is to develop a sustainable capital program, which is basically what we just talked about. The essence of, in more detail, is what we talked about. So the goal on Friday is not to get into as much detail as the committees or the discussion you just heard. So to the extent that you feel comfortable, if you feel like is wading into some of this presentation material,
Lift it out of the weeds.
the board member might be able to be encouraged to go online and watch the live streaming of the presentation Debbie just made.
Yeah, that's good. Got it.
Okay. One more question on this. So what's the total number of buses we have total now?
Today,
200.
yeah.
203, would you include the all revenue?
203.
Okay, and so at the end of 2020, we still have that 203?
Well, we're
maintaining the same?
We're reducing the size of the fleet by proposing to contract out the services in Tampa, contract out and with this includes this assumes the service adjustment plan that for which are the 5 routes we talked about, 444, 31 redesign in the East Lake, and 58.
So what's the 2020 projected fleet size? If you have it now, just
We
provide it,
can provide that.
just to give us a sense. Is it going to
Yeah.
be roughly the same, a little
It's
bit
going to be like
smaller?
180 something.
yes,
180?
yes.
185. Or we
Okay, we can get that. And just, I don't know, is lease buses instead of owning them?
That's some people do that. There's there's requirements to use federal funds to, and another way to tackle that same problem is just hold on to the old buses that you might dispose of, park them out back, so to speak, for a while. If we're thinking something like is going to come to fruition in the short term.
Well, speaking of service adjustments, I guess that's a good segue to our next presentation from Chris Cochran.
And I'm going to go ahead and pass this document that the planning department has provided. I mean, this was a presentation that was on your agenda last month, and we ran late and we didn't cover it. I think we have talked about a lot of what this original idea was. I think Chair Johnson asked that this presentation come back about with the routes, and this document.
This is different than what's online?
This is fresh on the presses. We're going to really pass this out at the workshop on Friday, but I think this will help the discussion more than necessarily going through the whole PowerPoint.
So before, and this is really a sort of a behind-the-curtain look at what your planning department is doing. So this is how we are going to take the policy decisions that you make and put them into action. So normally you wouldn't necessarily see this level of detail. We thought it was really good for you to see how this plays out. So I'll let Chris get into some of the more technical stuff.
Good morning, everyone. So, again, we had the opportunity to revisit this performance monitoring methodology, and really, we had the opportunity to take your feedback that you provided in March from the Planning Committee, and in particular the board meeting in March, and really come back to you, and I think we've done a good job in having the opportunity to summarize the PowerPoint that you see in here with a few good slides that will hopefully kind of reiterate the message to you and how we're doing our process, and help kind of give you the confidence in knowing that this is the right path for this methodology. So first and foremost, again, this whole process that we're going through, being in the interest of this customer-oriented service redesign that we introduced to at the board workshop, and having the opportunity to, under all of this, under the umbrella of the community bus plan that has been done in the past, and understanding that all of these processes that we're going through are coming up with these recommendations that are really sort of built on this canvas of the community bus plan that we have invested in the past, and it's still very valid. This is the opportunity for us to look at today's information and validate what they have provided to us with the scenario that we're in today that is part of that community bus plan. So, again, this process made up of the two steps, that quantitative analysis that allows us to really dive into the performance of the routes and give a good explanation of how routes are performing compared to all the other routes in the system. And the graphic you'll see next, you've seen before, but we've made some sort of little changes to it that we think will definitely make it easier to understand and some of the questions and concerns you had in the board meeting. That second step, and really at this point in time becoming a much more important part of that process, in that qualitative portion of this process, and that's consulting plan. When we identify what routes we need to look at, and because that performance monitoring tool is triggering that notice to us to really go and take a look at it, we're consulting that community bus plan and saying what has already been done in it. Is this something that has had some recommendations done before? And really something that we're coming into now in the next couple of weeks is engaging those customers and communities in going out surveys, understanding who are the people that might be affected by any changes, and really having the opportunity to understand who they are, what are they using the system for, where are they going, what impacts might they have, so we can make alternatives part of that final step in that recommendation for the actions that we will present to you, and you'll have the opportunity to be looking at in more detail this summer. So again, let's sort of dive back into this example. This is something you all have seen before. Again, this is our quantitative analysis. What is a little different here is on this left-hand side. In going away from any numbers, the important part here, this is a relative scale that's based on observed data. What is our best performing route and what is our least performing route? And that is the gist of what this tool is doing. It's not, the scoring isn't specific to anything more than how it's performing in the system as a whole. And that's important that it's not telling us this is what we're going to do. This is what we might have to make this decision because of this. It's telling us this is our problem area that we want to focus on right now. That first step. And again, example that we've brought up before, in have this evaluation of our performance, we go into that step 2 and that quantitative analysis that's becoming really the critical factor in how we make our recommendations. And again, that first step is saying, in this example, as highlighted down here, the East Lake Connector, we say, okay, what does the community bus plan say about it? In this particular case, the connector was so new, they didn't have data to make any recommendations. However, we have good data at this point in time to help support the decisions or the recommendations that we are likely to be proposing forward. And then, we're looking at other data. We're taking a really detailed analysis of the entire corridor from the beginning all the way to the end. In this case, it's that Keystone Road, Tarpon Road area going down, it's actually Tarpon Road, and down East Lake Boulevard. And really understanding that there's no particular segment of this route that's doing really good and the rest isn't. We have the data and analysis to say this route is kind of a little bit of a dog from beginning to end, and that's just what it is. That's what it's saying. Other data we're looking at is this financial analysis, understanding what is the money behind. In this particular case, this is a grant-funded route. It's funded by the Urban Corridor Program. We're able to that coordination and partnerships that we have with DOT that we've developed over, that we continually have.
This year, yes.
Yeah, it's very
Next year, no. So it varies from year to year. In this current year, I believe it's $400,000. In the years to come, it's about $236,000. What we've talked to the DOT about is there are other routes that are eligible for this funding source, so that it is not as if this route goes away that we necessarily lose the money. We're looking into that, so making sure that we can shift it to another route. Service development. Service development would not be eligible for moving once we start a service with this maintenance.
Thank you.
And thirdly, a good example, which has become I think this is a topic that has come up in concern of board members, and want to make sure it's understood that this is a huge part of this second step. Perhaps the most important part of it is going out and doing that public outreach and really understanding who our riders are. Next week, we'll actually, there will be several routes that we have a consultant that will be going out and doing onboard surveys, getting ideas of better understanding of the origin and destination of our customers on some of these routes, understanding why they're riding it, who they are, more about their demographics, and that is a big part of our analysis in making the recommendations, because we have the goal in mind of ensuring that we are, if we do make changes, that we're communicating what their alternatives are going to be. Anytime you're changing one route, you may have to make some changes to other routes to limit that negative impact. And whether it's directly related to alternatives directly to PSTA or some other alternatives in the community, we want to be a part of helping them understand what those alternatives will be for them to get where. So this is sort of a summary of the much more detailed stuff that you have in your packet. I think the idea was to give you a better understanding of how this process is working, and I think we've had some opportunities to answer some of the questions more specifically about the data, but if anyone has any more further details, I'd be happy to try to address it as best I can.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Give it a whirl.
So the handout, this is, you all are seeing this before, it will be handed out at the workshop on Friday. This is really the work plan that will, when you're looking from your policy level and understanding and giving us the support in moving forward and how we're doing this process. This is the work developed behind the scenes. And when we talk about these processes that I've just explained to you, what we try to do, what we have done is to the best of our ability through this analysis, is group these geographically, kind of logically, and looking at those low-performing routes and understanding if we move this route or we affect this route. We grouped it geographically and saying, we may want to address these other issues at the same time. Would this make sense? It would be the most efficient way to go with that. We've laid out a timeline, a proposed timeline for making these. We have sort of 10 groups that we've grouped these changes, proposed changes into, and this process will be done to each one of these groups. So that is kind of the proposed work plan and methodology and how that would move forward.
So how does this get readjusted as we move towards our high-frequency grid approach?
That process is built into this as the overarching idea of that the community bus plan is that canvas on which all of this will be applied to. It's something, those recommendations have been made in the community bus plan. And part of this process is going back and looking what can be tweaked, what can we validate as being that is the best thing to do that the community bus plan has said. But also, some of that stuff was done a few years ago. There have been changes in the community that we need to take into account, and of course, who are we impacting, and what kind of alternatives do we need to take into account in making these changes? Because that level of detail may not necessarily have been done for every one of their proposed changes. That's where we want to take that further step in ensuring that due diligence is done, and that impact is being minimized, if a change was to happen. Does that help answer that a little bit?
Kind of. It does the whole, canvas of the community bus plan.
Mm-hmm.
I got that. I guess I'm thinking that if theoretically the grid plan means that some routes, it would require some shifting of funds if the routes require higher frequency. So does that affect the return on investment on some of the routes if we're putting more money into it? I know I might be biting off a little more than I can chew with this line of questioning and getting into details. But I guess that... But I guess if the answer is, in the scheme of things, it doesn't shift things that much, then that's an okay answer for right now.
Okay.
Let me see if we could back up and explain how we decided what these groups are, and maybe that will help. So when we identify a problem route or something that we've got to take a look at and fix, we take a look at what's around there, okay? And we could say, we need to improve this route in this general geographic area because we're going to shift the resources from this other route because Route A is not performing as well, but Route C is one of our core. So we could, in this group, start shifting the system that way, but we want to make sure that we save for the people in that area the best investment for that area. So as part of your path forward discussion on Friday, one of the bullets on your pyramid is putting our resources where transit works best. And so when you make that policy decision, that's how we would look at it within the context of each one of these groups. So if you say, well, are we getting to that grid? We can move there to be prepared for that as sort of the vision, but we want to look at it on a zone-by-zone basis rather than looking at it as a network all at once. Now, we've grouped these, and we know that there are other systems around the country that they change their system and they flip a switch. But we've organized our work this way to understand our riders' tolerance for change. So this is how we organize our work, and this is how we'll look at the system. How it's implemented could be, 2 groups could get implemented at the same time. 4 groups could get implemented at the same time. But it's just a matter of how we're explaining to you our thought process and making sure that you are following.
Excuse me, is this like what you mean when you say realign Route 18 to replace Route 58? Is that basically what you're talking about?
Yes, right.
Okay.
So the 58 is not performing the way we'd like, but there are some elements of it we want to make sure that it continues to be service to, and so the 58, and so that would be an example.
I think it's a very smart, and I was just looking at some of the core routes that are affected before you explain what y'all are doing. But I think it's a very smart approach, if you would. And, how did you identify the regions? I understand it's mostly geographic, but how did you, for example, you got a Gulfport, Pinellas Point, South St. Pete, Route 7.
Right.
How did you define those areas?
We went first what we knew we had, the problems we had to solve, and then looked at that route and then all of the routes that touched it.
Okay.
And so we would look at how we would look at it holistically within that zone. And okay, well, depending on how we implement this, we may go, do a South County bit and a North County bit and implement those at the same time, so it's different people that are affected by a change. And again, this is about people's tolerance for change.
Right.
And so we tried to balance out, you're not changing everything in one area all at once, but you're changing the system slowly. So that, all of those routes together, when we look at the community bus plan and how they interact, that's what we looked at the same time.
I think the beauty of it is you're not just eliminating routes, you are changing the service
Reconfiguring them.
delivery, so it still supports that whole area, which is one of my main concerns in other programs as well. So the other piece is, since you're changing more than just the low-performing routes, how do you communicate this to the community so they know what's coming?
That was my question.
Yeah.
We're thinking like that.
We have a zone-by-zone public engagement plan that we're working on. And so Bob Lasher is leading that community engagement. And he has a list of things that we will be doing, riding the buses, talking to people, going out and talking to community groups, neighborhood associations, making sure that we're engaging them in the discussion of the changes. And so he's got a whole list of ways that we need to engage the community, because at the end of the day, we're going to have a public hearing on these changes. And so
Are you talking this summer? What's your timetable?
we have a list to do this over the next
Over the next couple of years?
Dates are on the sheet. and
Oh, okay.
highlighted here.
What sheet?
The one that
This
just
one,
came.
the one you've got.
Yeah,
I don't
it
see
actually
any
looks like
dates.
it's grayed out.
Oh, over
Um,
here. Oh, you
So,
got it.
Group 1, our plan is to implement that with the October run bid, and the service change there. And then we would do Group 2 in February, 3, 4, and 5, June or October
Okay,
of 2016.
great.
Could I make a suggestion about these changes, especially in the North County and County? As you're getting ready to make them, do you think, and I offer this out for discussion, do you think that it occurs to me that there could be a real benefit in sharing that information with Senator Latvaller's office and Senator Brandis's office, just because as we move forward, if we're looking for them to continue to support us in money or funds or matching dollars or whatever, I think that would be really critical to let them know what it is that we're doing, and do it in a very timely way, just because they were so focused when we spoke to them in Tallahassee about wanting to know the nitty-gritty of what was now the green light failed. And that brings me to another subject matter about our grassroots effort when they are back home after session, which I'd like to present whenever your legislative committee meets next, because that could be really critical in terms of setting them up for the fall.
I think we have on our agenda for the executive committee to begin next planning.
But
Which
doesn't
will
that fall
involve
to the
the
legislative
Yeah.
committee?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
our job.
Yeah. So we don't,
So again, this is an informational item on this agenda. As Senator just said, this is another box on the path forward, overall plan that's going to be discussed on Friday. And our plan is to present this document to the and have some discussion on it, because they will have just seen it. No doubt, I've already spoken to some other board members who are not here, like the chair of this committee, and they look at it and, well, why is the Jolly Trolley in group number 6? And why can't it be group number 6? You know, or there might be comments like that that we work through. As the schedule is for group number 1, which is the first thing on the agenda and part of the budgeting process, the planning committee is going to be back presenting their much more detail on group number 1 at your planning committee. And then that will also be when you'll receive input on all of the public involvement and feedback we've gotten from riders and input there. Later in the day on Friday, I'm going to present a series of performance metrics that allow us to understand how we're going to monitor our progress on the Path Forward plan in total, and just one of the items which the planning committee has already given me a lot of grief about. But the whole goal is, and my goal is, to say to the board, number 1, we're following the community bus plan, but we with a warm heart. And which is Commissioner Welch's thing, that we are looking at our...
why would you get that from your staff?
I put it in a performance metric that says we commit to identifying alternatives for 50% of affected customers through this. And they didn't really give me grief on that goal, but they said, how are you going to figure out, how are you going to do that?
45%.
How do you know it's not 48% or whatever? And so I said, well, that's their job to figure it out.
It's got to be measurable.
Yeah, it's got to be measurable. They're going to
That's why
figure
you
it out.
have to read.
Yeah, that we do commit, that we are looking, we identify who is affected, and we work with them. we worked through this process. The goal is to to implement the community bus plan, but not change all the routes together so it all works together. That's the goal.
Yes, sir.
So how did you prioritize these groups in terms of which first, second, third, fourth, related to the Jolly Trolley?
We went from our biggest issues first.
Which is really
So really some of the performance evaluation. And
So the lowest performers? were
we
the
took
ones you were-
we took the lowest performers
Okay.
and said, now let's look at everything around there. So you could have a group that has a low performer, and then you've got all along the way.
Right.
But if you looked at the groups in general, they sort of move from the bottom up
Okay.
in general.
So that,
The other thing that we took into consideration was, in the case of the Jolly Trolley, was the timing of the procurement of those services.
okay.
And
So for each of
that-
these, there's a low-performing anchor that you built around?
Of sorts, until you get
Okay.
the
So
later
what-
groups, maybe not.
What's the dollar savings from Group 1? We're trying to implement that for FY16.
930?
How much?
930,000.
That's another hand I should get on Friday.
Okay, so we're shooting for that savings for FY16,
Yeah.
930. Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Stay tuned until Friday.
That's good.
Let's see it again.
Thank you.
We're looking at the clock. Agenda item B was also rolled over from last month, and it's a reminder that the Planning Committee is the committee that reviews the budget, the annual budget, and the assumptions we put into the budget. That's why the Planning Committee, you just recommended the capital improvement program, because it's a plan for the future, the idea. And so traditionally, we present sort of our assumptions that we're building into the budget that you're going to get next month. You're going to see next month on personnel. To cut to the chase is what I'm recommending for the administrative employees is a 3%, to budget a 3% adjustment to administrative employees at PSTA based on merit, based on a performance evaluation process that we tie in, so that giving some department heads discretion so that they can average the percentage adjustments based on the merit of their employees, which is similar to what we did last year. We've done a survey of governments, Pinellas County, Pinellas Park, Clearwater. Others are at 3% for next year. St. Petersburg is at 2%, or the mayor's budget proposal is 2%. On the union side, which is the vast majority of our costs, we have set a number which I disclosed in closed session right before this to 4 of you who are there. But it'll be basically a budget that we set aside for the contract negotiations with our biggest union this summer. And you can look at the rest of the packet of the initiatives. Do you want to quickly tell the health insurance ideas?
Yes. Health insurance is one of our key cost drivers for our fringe benefits. And right now, we are anticipating, if we stay fully insured, a little over 10% increase in cost. The recent months that we've had have had a higher utilization rate, which is driving that. And we've asked our Garing Group, who's our consultant, to go back and look at that again. In the absence of that going downward, we've put a 7% increase in the budget, which is based on a minimum payment plan. And a minimum payment plan is like a hybrid between being self-insured and fully insured.
you're giving all the risk over to the insurance company. They're basically handling all the claims for you, making sure that you've got the network to go to. But essentially, it's like time and material, actually paying for the claims themselves, not the IFCOM of claims, which is in a premium.
But are they acting as gatekeepers at the same time?
You would hire the insurance company to manage the claims. You would also get a like a stop loss policy to go on top of that.
What is
and
it?
then
Is it an insurance company or is it a TPA?
It is the insurance company. When you go fully self-insured, you would hire the TPA. Third party. So now going fully self-insured, we would have to set aside somewhere between $150,000 to $1 million to fund any of the requirements that go along with it. For this plan, we would also be setting aside funding of about $450,000, and that's in case if we ever go back to a different plan, it's basically to pay off all the tail claims, or all the claims going forward that are already in the pipeline. So it's a reserve that we would set up.
Have you analyzed the reason for the increase in usage?
A couple things are affecting it, and there's a hepatitis vaccine that is out that is a one-time hit to us, or to now they take it, I think, 4 to 6 months. It's like a one-time hit. They won't ever have to take it again. That's rising it. I'm not sure exactly of specifics on specific cases that are driving it. A couple things is we want to go back and ask them, has our utilization gone down? Is it stabilizing back down again? That could maybe bring us back into being fully insured. The other thing is we want to sit down with the unions to get their input, since they're sharing in 50% of the cost increase. One of the things in the presentation is we also have an option of increasing our deductibles that would keep the cost lower. It's what are the employees, what's their stress point on that. So we still have yet to sit down to get their input, but we have options available to us. And I want to keep it no more than, if I can, the 7 that's budgeted in. And if you have any experience with these plans that you could share, that would be great.
I used to be the deputy insurance commissioner, so I wish I could get rid of that path, but it always seems to come into play somehow.
Well, maybe I'll chat with you and get your input.
Well,
Your interest.
actually, 2 years ago, the board approved, and for the first time in PSA's history, the employees started paying a small portion of the health insurance. Before, PSA was paying all of it, so employees didn't really care. But now that they have skin in the game, that they are paying a small amount each month, and the unions are paying it in our contracts, like Debbie said, now there's a lot of input, and now we're trying to mitigate the cost growth. But there's an incentive to mitigate the cost growth. So it's great that Debbie has looked into this, come up with this idea of, what's it called?
It's a minimum payment.
Minimum payment plan, to go from our current process of being fully insured with Cigna to this alternative to keep, and that will lower the cost. The downside to me, it looks like, is that we have to put aside this $450K reserve. So we'd have to do that, but overall, even with that, it might be the lowest cost option.
Do we have a wellness program?
We do. We have pretty...
My wellness warriors month.
Has it been effective in reducing
Well,
claims or?
I think Michael
Does it
may win
solve
a contest.
hepatitis?
We've got
I'm
going
sure
on.
it is, but we're talking about pharmaceutical costs that are going through the ceiling, and the Hep C drug, Sovaldi, it's great, it's a breakthrough drug, what we want, for cancer and lots of other diseases, but Sovaldi's $100,000.
And that's driving our costs?
This, I think one of the factors that we were told is driving costs, medical costs that overall are going up with the providers at about 12%.
So I think to your point, there may be things that we can target in our wellness program, but we have had something, I would say, just about every single month as far as lunch and learn series, going.
Is there a required, Janice,
Oh, yes, sorry.
what is that thing we have to do every year? If we don't get our
The biometric.
Oh, we
biometrics, then our deductibles go up.
But they want you to make sure you get a physical every single year.
And we do that, but we don't have
There's no
a penalty.
Well, there's a penalty to us, because
Yeah.
$500 extra.
Your deductible goes up. And it's been effective. And there's been some folks about having that.
I mean, our voluntary deal, we, well, it's actually Cigna. Cigna gives out gift cards and stuff. And we had a pretty high percentage of employees.
What was it, you remember?
Larry, do you know?
We were about 175 this year, I think, last year.
What percentage is that? I mean,
25%.
A little higher, about 32, I think.
We had almost 98.
we're higher than that. 'Cause
Yeah,
it-
but if we're not the first
it's
year
cash
of it
if you
either.
don't do it. Just throwing it out.
But I'd be open to that. So again, you'll see that as part of the overall budget presentation next month, too.
So if we're done with that section, just FYI on future meeting subjects, our FY16 draft budget, the proposed millage rate. When's the deadline for making, or what the just on the millage rate? Is that July?
I think so.
Right, again, this on Friday, Debbie's got a little sheet that kind of puts
Okay.
us down in the schedule. June is the draft budget presentation. July is the deadline for when you have to advertise your maximum millage rate. And then we have 2 public hearings in September that finally approve the millage rate for.
What ad valorem, Madam Chair, what ad valorem are you using for the property tax increase?
0.75 at our maximum millage as far as the budget is concerned.
No, I'm sorry, in terms of the property appraiser's valuation.
Oh, that will be first, so.
We haven't,
Usually the 20th of May,
but what number are we using now?
the assumption in the
We're
budget.
using the county recommendations from January.
But ours has gone up.
I know, I think it has gone up, but we haven't gotten ours yet.
Substantially.
Yeah. Yeah, I think,
It's like over 7%.
wow.
Yeah.
Have we
I
gotten it?
think, no. That's a lot of money.
I mean, in the past, we've been on the million, I thought it had been before, in May,
Okay.
but
Yeah,
we haven't gotten it yet.
Tax base.
Yeah, the percent increase that we were looking at was percent, so if you're telling me it's more,
Oh, it's much more.
oh, that'd be
But, of
great.
course, we aren't countywide.
Yeah.
Right, so we're a little bit.
But even still, it
Should
should
be
be a
higher than that.
substantial difference.
Yeah.
Okay, we got it.
Any other business? I think we need to adjourn because we've got to get to our next meeting.
Yes, we do. Thank
Great,
you.
thank you.
Good.
Yeah. Where am I? Oh, yeah, oh my God, thank you for reminding me. Jesus, Issa, people are gonna start talking about us. Hey, you missed this, great.
I couldn't get there at 7:30.
Oh, you've got to, you can't stay up with the hours and fly with the eagle.
I went to bed like 3 o'clock.
Oh, and I had to get up an hour early and go back to the morning before I went to the because I left my phone there. So,
Yeah.
It's funny.
We talked about, we get that flow.